Our mid-morning presentation will be led by Shane Sexton, my TEA colleague in the Office of School Safety and Security. He is going to present on a topic that has been a top priority for everyone, school safety. And he will also share information about the Safe and Supportive Schools program. Please use the Q&A feature, and Shane will answer questions at the end of his session.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's still morning. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to say that I was really happy that Rohana asked me to be here. I feel really blessed that I'm able to share a little bit of information, not only about what we're doing to help keep our kids safe, but as part of some of the collaborative efforts that we do, both in the safety side, but how we work with our partners to help provide those wraparound supports to make sure that our kids are taken care of, both physically and psychologically. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. Basically, before coming to the agency in February, I spent 23 years in law enforcement. I spent the bulk of my career actually focusing on education, whether or not that was higher education, or I actually started my career in a school district. And I realized that that's basically where my passion was. I focused a lot of my training on how to better assist kids and how to better assist and contribute to the overall educational environment. So throughout my career, I focused on things like becoming a mental health officer and becoming a de-escalation instructor. I was given an opportunity to attend and become a board certified workplace violence and threat specialist and a human trafficking investigator. And then through the last 5 years of my career, I was actually the chief of police at Concordia University. And then I started Manor ISD's police department and concluded my career there before coming to the agency in February, like I said. So I like to start every presentation that I give with kind of an opening question. And as we go through this, what I'll do is I'll actually challenge you to remember your why. I know the whole quote is, when you think about quitting, remember why you started. But the important part is remember your why. Because the easiest quote for me when I think about this is a John F. Kennedy quote where he said that children are the living messages we send to a time we will not see. Because our kids today depend on us for a safe learning environment. In some circumstances, the kids, schools are the only place where they're going to find some kind of structure and stability. It's the only place where meals may be consistent. I remember at a school district that I was at after Katrina, that there was a little kindergartner that came from a school where he had evacuated from, that meals weren't consistent prior to the being evacuated, and this poor little kindergartner was waiting in line for food at the district, and he actually was so scared that he wasn't going to be able to eat. He held a fork to another student's nose, thinking that he wasn't going to be able to eat, and was so worried that he wasn't going to get food that he was willing to fight for it. And he didn't realize that food was going to be more stable where he was at. And it's those things that make you think that schools have so much to offer, and that a lot of times it's where they actually feel stable and secure. And it makes you realize that it's up to us to meet their needs and to equip them so that they can leave the world a better place than where they found it. So in short, it's basically my belief that their future depends on what it is that we do for them today. So it's our why that's the most important why of them all. And on a personal note, what I'll tell you is that my why is this little 7-year-old girl that I come home to every day. She goes to karate on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And every day when she gets home from karate, she likes to come home and practice on me and beat me up. And she reminds me every day why I go to work, and wants to make sure that things are safer for her, and that she has an opportunity to have a safe educational environment, and that she deserves the best that she can have and the brightest future that she can have. So here's some of the stuff that we're going to go over today. This is basically how we're going to spend our time together. We're going to talk about some of the safe and supportive school stuff like Rohana mentioned. We're going to go over the origins of it. We're going to talk about some of the resources that are available, and just go over some of next steps and some of the current things that we're working on, and some of the overlaps of the work. Basically, I'll explain a little bit about how there's been a little separation of work streams, but how we still work collaboratively together. So the biggest thing that I'll ask you is, by all means, if you have any questions, drop them in that Q&A box. But the primary thing I'm going to say is that if you take any nugget from anything that I can offer, please share it. And if you have any questions, please make sure that you reach out to me, because I'm here to make sure that I answer anything that I can. And I'm always happy to share any knowledge that I have, anything that I can get, and to be a resource to make sure that I help you find the answers that you need. So, like I was saying, more recently, the Division of Safe and Supportive Schools was kind of divided into 2 work streams. It's essentially supportive schools and safe schools. And despite that division, we all continue to work really closely together to better ensure both the physical and the psychological safety of the 5.5 million students that are in our Texas schools. So as a larger team, basically, our goal has been to provide, and it remains to provide, the tools and resources that are needed by LEAs to properly implement a safe and supportive schools program. So ultimately addressing both the academic and the non-academic needs of our students. So as we talk about the beginning of Senate Bill 11 in 2019, essentially there's a lot of things that sort of took place, and I'm sure many of you remember how overwhelming it sort of seemed, and I'll see if I can't break down some of the some of it into pieces and talk about why a lot of it came to be, and why the governor found so much of it to be important, why the legislature found so many of the components, and why so much of it was actually implemented. So when they started looking at Senate Bill 11, there was a Secret Service report that came out in 2018. And in that Secret Service report, there was a lot of things that they studied. They studied a lot of incidents of school violence. And as they studied them, and they did a lot of research into students, they spoke with a lot of students. Not only did they discover things like 6% of high school students experience weapon-related threats at school, but they also found out that like 19% of the kids that they talked to talked about how they were bullied in person. And almost that exact same percentage said that they were bullied in some kind of electronic format, like a cyberbullying. And as they continued through that, they were bullied or experienced some type of violence to the extreme that 17.2% of the kids actually considered suicide. And of that 17.2%, 13.6% of them actually formed a plan. And if you look, that bottom number is just astronomical. There's 800,000 crimes or acts of violence against students in the United States. So you can see how significant this study actually became. And just as a side note, one of the things that I'm not sure if you noticed in Chief Scott's bio, something that's really worth noting is Chief Scott came from the Secret Service, and it's amazing that we have somebody that's used to working with the agency that not only generated this report, but this report is also the report that pointed out the need for behavioral threat assessments and the need for the multidisciplinary teams that would contribute and best be involved in those, and how best to conduct, how those teams should be comprised, and how to best implement it, basically like a best practices guide. So John coming to work for the agency is just an astronomical resource with a wealth of knowledge about how the origins of SB11 came about, basically. So one of the other study implications that came about is there were 41 specific incidents that were looked at in there. And there's not a traditional profile for what you would look at for somebody who would commit a targeted school violence attack. It's not what you would think of when you look at like that traditional like serial killer kind of profile, like the white male, 18 to 35. It doesn't have that kind of traditional profile for it, right? But it did have some common indicators. It had themes to it, like of the multiple motives. There was traditional things that stuck out, like there were grievances with classmates, and there might be interest in violent topics, such as like maybe they were looking at violent video games. I'm about to age myself, but there were things like if you were from my era, maybe they were watching videos like Faces of Death. There was something, it was called Darwin's Ways to Die or something like that came out more recently. And then there were social stressors. Maybe they had problems with relationships, whether that was romantic relationships or peer relationships or problems at home. And then the bullying thing also came into play. But one of the most common things that stuck out is that of all the behaviors, they were observed by others. So if they were observed by others, the one thing that stuck out in my mind the most was, if all of these behaviors were observed, what could have happened if the proper supports had been in place, or if somebody would have noticed and relationships would have been established, if rapport would have been established, and these people felt comfortable talking to somebody else. When I was the chief of police at Manor, one of the expectations that I had from my officers was that they were in the hallway during every passing period. And I told them that I wanted them to say hello to everybody that they could. And of course, I got the feedback, they're not going to say hello back. I was like, that's okay. Because if you say hello 100 times and they ignore you, but on the 101st time, they say hello back, you've started something. You've started a relationship, you've started rapport building, and that's going to be important. And to be quite honest, I felt like I was a genius when I came up with that idea. I was presenting a while back at ESC1, and at the end of my presentation, I talked about this exact same thing. And I walked out into the hallway, and there was a table set up for vendors and stuff. One of the vendor tables was the Department of Homeland Security. And I looked down at one of their little brochures, and they had this brochure called The Power of Hello. So there I was thinking I was a genius the whole time. And I guess I was accidentally co-using a concept that had been in existence for quite a while. But it's still same concept though. Relationship building can make a huge impact on people. And apparently it's now what studies show. So just a little forewarning that kind of hits the point that I was just trying to make. If we establish relationships and we notice the things that seem obvious, or if we pay attention to the things that could be noticed, or if we pay attention to the things that are sometimes overt, what can be prevented? This is the manifesto from the Sparks, Nevada middle school shooting in 2013. What I will tell you is that if you were to read through it, I'm not sure if you can see it all. It starts dear teachers and students. But the implication is that there were staff members that actually knew what was going on, and that he was being called all kinds of names, and that people were stealing money, and that he was being called stupid and idiot, and he was being made fun of, and people were saying that he's lazy and that he urinates in his pants, and that all kinds of stuff, and that staff knew that it was happening to him, that he was just being bullied repeatedly, and that nobody stopped to help him. And if that would be the case, I wonder what could have been done and how somebody could have actually helped him. So, although I recognize that these numbers aren't exactly current, what I would say is that if you look at it, this is not what I know this is not what people mean when they say that things are bigger in Texas. This is not what should be meant. And I will tell you that in a more recent time period, I was able to find numbers for up to 2022, and we actually are currently leading California by 2. I believe it was 43 in Texas and 41 in California for a more recent, like 5-year period. So if we looked at the YRBS, the CDC's report, which actually has more current statistics, about 1 in 5 kids say that they're bullied in school. And you look at 9% of high school students that said they've missed at least one day out of the last 30 because they didn't think they were going to be safe at school or either going to or from school. So they just skipped because at some way, form, or fashion, they didn't feel like they were going to be safe. And another 7% say, hey, I was either injured or threatened with some kind of weapon one or more times on school property in the last 12 months. So it's statistics like those that were the genesis for safe and supportive schools. And the idea that the governor said, that's enough. It's time that we do things to make it safe for our kids to learn. And these are the ways that we're going to do it. We're going to look at how we're going to have continuous improvement and how we're going to train our staff and how we're going to look at behavioral threat assessments and multi-tier system of supports using all the resources that we currently have and bringing in those community partners to make sure that our kids are taken care of and accessing every available thing that we can to do our best for the kids. But what was originally noticed is that although these pieces exist in a school environment, and although these pieces are there to some degree, they just weren't operating together. It's like they were in a silo, right? And separated for whatever reason. But part of what Senate Bill 11 did is bring them together. So with Senate Bill 11, the idea was TEA was charged with kind of leading an effort to make sure that there was a coordination of all the supports and that the efforts were connected to make sure that our kids were better taken care of, to make sure that basically that all of the folks were moving together in the same direction at the same time at the same speed. So ultimately, Safe and Supportive Schools program was charged with ensuring that LEAs are equipped with the resources and tools to support both the physical and the psychological safety of students. And to be honest with you, we worked really hard to avoid messaging that makes Safe and Supportive Schools programs sound like, you know, that's just one more thing a district or campus has to do thanks to TEA. We recognize that schools can't be everything for every student, but there are resources outside of a campus that are best positioned to fill the gaps to support schools in meeting the needs of the whole child. So we approach Safe and Supportive Schools programs kind of from a stance of prioritizing integration of services using a multi-tier system of supports as an anchor to address school climate, social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health wellness, collaborating with community partners, conducting threat assessments in a manner that allows individuals to be proactive in how they support students. So basically, Safe and Supportive Schools program teams at campuses have a lot of responsibilities. Not only are they going to help conduct the threat assessments, but they're going to collect data and help refer students for mental health assessments and help implement an escalation procedure and based on the assessments that they do. And they're charged with, you know, helping teach others in their campus community, those students and employees, what harmful, threatening, and violent behavior looks like. It's basically like helping develop that see something, say something culture. And then they're also going to help support the district in implementing their emergency operations plan. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this in different variations. But when it comes to supports, if somebody's on the pathway to violence, and I'm going to quote Chief Scott here, the best thing that we can do for somebody is, if they're on the pathway to violence, the later that something is noticed, the harder it becomes to off-ramp them. So the earlier that we're able to detect something, the earlier that we're able to provide supports, the earlier that we're able to help somebody, the more supports we're able to offer. And again, I'll go back to the power of hello. Again, I'll go back to the more we're able to reach out to somebody, and the more rapport we have, and the more we're able to notice. You know, I've heard several times people talking about, if you notice something that's wrong with somebody that seems out of character for them. I've been at different summits and stuff where I've heard somebody say, you know, I don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, what's wrong with you today? But walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm here when you're ready to talk, or I'm here if you need to talk. Just those simple interactions and simple conversations to let somebody know that you care and you're there. Those things make a huge difference and go a long way. So I'll talk about how we partner with our amazing folks like Julie and Rohana. So I found this amazing quote, right? And it says, the bottom line on student learning today is this: you can't teach if you're not addressing mental health. And if you think about COVID alone, the last statistic I read estimated that somewhere around 214,000 children had lost a parent to COVID. So to say that students don't need mental health support is like saying that they don't need air. I found an April 2022 poll from the National Education Association. And of the parents polled, 75% actually said that their child would benefit from mental health counseling. And from that poll year over year, that was a 70% increase from 2021. And about 33% of the parents that were polled indicated that their child had recently shown signs of some kind of mental health issue, with anxiety and depression being the most common. And I know a lot of you are probably familiar with Project Restore, with it coming about as a result of COVID and understanding trauma and its impact. And I have a personal story that I prefer to tell with this. That same 7-year-old that I discussed earlier on, she was in kindergarten when COVID hit its hardest. And they went to that virtual learning environment, right? And you never think about the impact, I guess, initially, unless you truly experience it sometimes. And she has epilepsy. And until that point, it had only been absence seizures, and they were well maintained with medication. And a little bit after going to the virtual learning environment, she had a grand mal seizure. And they were able to determine, it was best determined that what her feelings were is that she was being punished, and that she saw all the other kids on the computer and she thought that they were all in school, and that she was the only one in the virtual learning environment. And that for some reason she didn't deserve to be in class and everybody else did. So you never understand the full trauma of something until you actually experience it. COVID had far-reaching impacts beyond some of the slowed education or slower learning, some of the slowed learning curve that folks may never understand until you just do. So I'm sure you've heard a lot about Project Restore. But the biggest thing that I'll touch on is in year 4, goal number 4 is the primary focus, building that statewide capacity for promoting mental health awareness and wellness and the evidence-based practices. So I'm just going to kind of cruise through these. Basically, there's a lot of resources that are available on the School Mental Health Texas website. And that's what the next few slides covers. I want to make sure that I'm actually able to get to stuff. The big thing is how you'll find the toolkits, and you'll see a lot of the great partners that we actually have on the website. A lot of amazing resources that you're able to locate on the school mental health website. And the school mental health practice guide and toolkit. Yeah, there's just amazing stuff that they've been able to compile and put there. So I'll talk to you about what's next related to safety and some of the stuff that we're actually doing right now to kind of help our kids out. So this is kind of a huge picture of the school safety ecosystem, recognizing that there's a lot of state and local agencies and stuff that are out there doing a lot of really good work, right? So if you look at it, all of these entities are doing work contributing to overall school safety, recognizing that the mental health supports, that there's a direct, without the mental health support, there can't be the safety. Without it all working together, recognizing that each of these entities contributes to that school safety ecosystem. But a lot of the work has been done in silos, and a lot of the work has been done independently, and not everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And some of the work, to be honest with you, has been kind of duplicated. And one of the things that Chief Scott has been charged with doing is been to be kind of like a cohesive bond between all of these different entities and agencies, and making sure that we're all on the same bus in the right seats, moving together at the same time in the same direction at the same speed. I'll kind of use the example I gave earlier. And so he's been out, and I believe he's met with the bulk of these, if not most or all of them already, and making sure that we're all being able to function together and work towards that common goal, and doing everything we can as a collective to make sure that the kids are taken care of. So what one of his objectives is making sure that we have an open and honest dialogue. So he's out on the road. I don't know if you could tell, but that was a hotel room in his background. And so he's out on the road, and has been since the day he started. There hasn't been 1 week. He referenced the other day how when he walks in at his house, which is very rare at this point, his kids are basically along the lines of, you resemble our dad. Do you know him? So he left the Secret Service September 30th, and he started at TEA October 1st. And he has been on the road since basically the day he started, minus a small orientation period. Yeah. So, and one of the things that he openly admits is, as he's traveling, he's asking questions, and he knows that he doesn't know what he doesn't know. We just don't. So in creating an open, honest dialogue, he wants to know what the challenges and the opportunities are, and he wants to know what the wins are. And because the goal is, we got to know what we got to know to make it a safer environment for students to learn, grow, and play. And we don't know if people don't tell us. And we won't know unless people tell us what we need to know. So we're out there asking a whole lot of questions. So over the next several months, and I will tell you, we've been to school districts so far that have as small as 3 schools. We've even been to private schools just to find out what different entities are doing well, what challenges different kinds of organizations are facing, what wins different kinds of organizations are facing, because the idea is it's absolutely not a gotcha moment. It's how can we do everything we can to make sure that kids are safe. And if even a private school is doing something well, and we can say, hey, would you mind sharing this with another place that's not doing it as well, then we want to make sure that we're helping make connections, because it's not about attribution. Chief will always say it's not, attribution doesn't come if you're doing something wrong. Attribution comes if you're doing something well, and we want to be able to share resources with everyone. And maybe it'll be connections if you feel like you're struggling with something, and we'll help connect you with somebody that might be doing it really, really well to make sure that they can help you get along, and maybe help you with the resources that they found, because we're finding a lot of people out there that are doing things really well. And we want to make sure that those resources and the things that are being done really well are shared everywhere across the state. And we want to make sure that people know that there are other people in the exact same boat that they are, that may need a little help, and bring everybody together so it becomes a collective effort. And so everybody understands that the number one goal, and I'll repeat this, we understand that the number one goal of a school is to educate children. But what we're hoping to do is change the narrative to where the number one goal is to educate children and to keep them safe. Because if we can get that all in the same sentence, then we're really accomplishing something. Because unless safety is in the top 2 priorities in any organization, unless anything is in the top 2 priorities of any organization, then it's not anybody's priority. So our goal is to make sure that it becomes, our goal is to educate children and keep them safe. So we've been out listening and learning and learning and learning and learning, and doing our best to make sure that we share and connect people to make sure that our schools are as safe as they can be. And so I'm going to do a complete wraparound. In the very beginning, I said, remember your why. And hopefully you thought about it. Hopefully I made you think about something. But even on your worst day, even if you're struggling one day, even on a bad day, don't forget that maybe you are the lighthouse in somebody else's storm, and you are exactly the person they need to make their day better. So with that, I'll say I appreciate your time. Here's my contact information. If there's anything that I can do for you, if there's any questions I can answer, I'll pop into the Q&A. But if there's anything I can answer for you, anything I can do for you, I am more than happy to. Any resources I can provide you, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my cell phone in the Q&A. You're welcome to call me at any time. Please no 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because I like to sleep. But other than that, you're welcome to call me at any time, and I am happy to help you however I can.
Thank you, Shane. You're getting lots of great kudos in the chat. We so appreciate the helpful and timely information to support the psychological and physical safety and security of students and educators across our state. We very much appreciate the information. There is a question, what are some of the best first steps to bridging the gap between student discipline and student support services?
I will drop a couple of resources actually in the chat. Okay, so I will tell you one of the things that I didn't mention that I think is mentioned in my bio. One of the things that I went through that I found to be really useful is I attended a K-12 certification for the National Association of Behavior Intervention and Threat National Association of Behavior Intervention and Threat Assessment. NABITA has 20,000 free resources on their website. And it's everything from white papers to rubrics to they cover virtually any topic you can imagine that puts everything in sliding scales and basically when I was the chief at Concordia, I sat on a behavior intervention and support team, and we covered everything from Shane has missed 2 days of class. And maybe Shane missed 2 days of class because he was in a car wreck and got injured. And we had a multidisciplinary team that was put together, and maybe that was the registrar reaching out and reaching out to his professors and saying, hey, he's going to be absent for a few days. Basically, he was out ill. Please don't count him absent. We've got it covered. And we would handle all the legwork for him and basically do a wraparound service and make sure they were okay. To maybe Shane was out for a couple of days because his parents were going through a really tough time. And then we would connect him with the counselors or whatever that were actually on that same team. And we were able to make sure that that level of wraparound supports was available. Or maybe Shane had gotten arrested or something, and we were able to figure out exactly how that was going to impact school or look at a disciplinary perspective. Or so there was so many resources available, and the rubrics came in handy and everything else. And I feel like that's a really good place to start, not to point out a specific vendor, but it's something that I've experienced personally and something that I've worked with really closely. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to be able to attend that certification a few weeks ago. Because even when I was on the co-chair of the team, I hadn't attended the certification.
Well, that is awesome. I'm so glad you were able to engage in that opportunity and use it to guide your work moving forward. We're so thankful for your partnership and collaboration that you've shared with the mental health and wellness team here at TEA, and we look forward to that continued collaboration. Thank you so much, Shane.
Thanks, Rohana.
And I will also share a resource in the chat regarding the technical assistance, behavior support, and guidance for students with disabilities that was shared on the first day of this summit. That might help as well with some of the discipline questions in terms of bridging those gaps. This guide is helpful for all levels of tiered supports. And so we hope that you will find it useful in your work moving forward.